One day, I found out that my husband was cheating on me, but I could not divorce him just yet. The reason was because my daughter's birthday was coming up. But the day before her birthday, an incident that was indescribable in how painful and cruel it was occurred, and it eventually transformed the lives of both me and my daughter for the better.
I have to go on a business trip starting tomorrow.
Over my dead body. I made up my mind to take action right then and there, and so, after seeing him off the following day, my daughter and I packed all our stuff and left the apartment, never to return. 2 days later, my husband came home and called me. His tone sounded like he was very upset and confused, which was exactly what I was hoping he'd feel.
Are you so mad at me for going elsewhere on Katie's birthday? Oh, come on now, honey, be reasonable. I had work to do, and I told you that no one could go in my place. We'll celebrate it again next year.
I was beyond disgusted by this point because he had purposefully betrayed my daughter, but seemed to have no qualms about it. There won't be a next year, buddy.
What the hell?
I proceeded to tell my completely clueless husband the truth. This is the story of how my husband destroyed our family and didn't seem to be very remorseful of the world of pain he caused his wife and daughter, and how I quickly took decisive action to give him what he deserved for doing such heinous things. My name is Prudence, and I'm a 40-year-old housewife. My husband, Thomas, better known as Tommy, and I have been married for 10 years. I initially met my husband at work. We originally worked in different departments, myself in accounting and Tommy in sales. But a problem in the company network caused our paths to cross one fateful day. As we cooperated and worked on solving the problem, we hit it off, and having lunch together during our break turned into dinner dates. These turned into a formal relationship, and after 2 years of being together, we were happily married in a beautiful wedding next to the sea. I can still remember the smell of seawater in the balmy air as I walked down the aisle, arm in arm with my dad. After we married, I continued to work for a while, but eventually resigned when I found out I was pregnant with our daughter, Katie. Time flies by like a bullet because fast forward 7 years to when our story begins, and my daughter was in the 2nd grade. Katie grew up to be a rather quiet, pensive young lady, but that doesn't mean she was perpetually serious or taciturn. She was very bright, both in intellect and in personality, and she was so full of energy that it was hard to keep her under control sometimes. She loved going outside for walks in the park, and she also loved to help me with the cooking. She was too young to use any knives to cut anything, but she had become an expert at stirring and adjusting the taste of the dish. Such was Katie, and my life at home was wonderful. However, I did have one problem that I just wished could be fixed. It's that Tommy, my husband, doesn't spend enough time with his daughter. When I got pregnant, I started talking about a future full of hope and dreams, but then he said something that instantly cast dark clouds over the sunshine-lit possibilities of the upcoming years as new parents.
Since you're the housewife, it's only so obvious you're in charge of all the housework and childcare, isn't it?
That singular line should be enough to tell you that he quite literally hasn't done anything to take care of our daughter ever since she was a baby. Additionally, more recently, he had been away from home more and more often, working overtime and going on business trips. If that was reflected in his salary and paid the living expenses with more money to spare, I might have been less dissatisfied with the situation, but the money Tommy brought into the house had never changed, even though he was working far more hours than usual. For example, last year, when she was about to start elementary school, I asked Tommy, "Katie is going to elementary school, so we're going to have some more expenses to take care of. Could you please increase our budget for living expenses a little more, honey? Please," he replied with a dubious, cantankerous look on his face.
What? We can't afford any increase in living expenses anymore, honey. We're running out of money, too.
Is that so? But I see you've been working hard lately, so you must have some money to spare, right?
Well, you're right. But as I work more, I also have to spend more money on socializing occasions. Makes good business and builds my reputation.
In the end, he did not agree to increase our living expenses and make our lives a little easier. I had no choice but to use a large portion of money from my savings from when I was single to pay off Katie's school fees. Another problem that resulted from Tommy's lack of interest in his daughter's life was that Katie herself missed her daddy's company. "Come on, darling, it's time to go to bed."
No. I'm staying up until Daddy gets home.
No, sweetie. Good girls have to go to bed early. You know, honey, Daddy's working hard for you. He wants you to be happy, and if don't go to bed early, you won't get enough sleep and you'll get all grumpy.
No.
Will Daddy like to see you grumpy? No, he will not like it. He wants to see you smiling. Come on, honey. Let's read a bedtime story together before bed.
Okay, Mommy.
It was not unusual for my daughter and I to have this sort of exchange at night. I only wished that my husband would pay a little more attention to his family. I was spending my days in this manner, but there was one thing I was looking forward to during that particular month. That occasion was Katie's birthday at the end of the month. Fortunately, her birthday was on a Sunday that year, and I wanted to celebrate it well with a big, fancy meal. Lots of presents, and above all else, time together as a happy family. The only thing I was worried about was, of course, my husband. As usual, he had to go out for work on Sundays. I hoped he wouldn't make any plans for his daughter's birthday, which comes but once a year. I feared something was going to happen, so asked Tommy for about a month to make sure he would keep Katie's special day free so that he could celebrate it with her.
Listen, I have to go to work tomorrow. I know it's on such short notice, but I'm left without a choice.
What? Isn't tomorrow Saturday? Working on a weekend day again?
It is a busy time of the month.
I told you before. Please don't put in work at the end of the month. You know Katie is looking forward to spending time with you for the first time in a while, right?
Yeah, I know. How many times have you told me that? It's getting old.
I'm sorry. Kinda ironic, to be honest. Tommy always got a bit irritated at me for being persistent whenever I told him about the occasion. But he was the kind of person who never listened to me unless I reminded him repeatedly, without any sign of ceasing. That was why I was telling him repeatedly, otherwise, he would just forget. I had come to understand his character over the years of our married life, but I couldn't let him be absent from home on this one special day. As the birthday approached, Tommy began to work more and more on his days off. I initially thought he was trying his best to avoid working on Katie's birthday by cramming in everything he could do before the big day. I helped him by making his lunch early in the morning and preparing a meal that could be eaten by heating it up quickly for when he came home late. But then, something unbelievable happened. It was something completely unexpected, and it completely shattered my perception of our relationship. A former coworker of mine, who had changed jobs before I had resigned from my job, contacted me to say that she had seen Tommy walking arm in arm with a woman near her current workplace. But don't people cross their arms when they're joking around too? After a short pause, I received a photo of Tommy and a woman I didn't recognize entering a hotel room in the middle of the day, looking very into each other, indeed. The fact that they were walking arm in arm was what caused my ex-colleague concerned for me, because she had in fact already witnessed the moment they walked inside. At first, I didn't think it was possible, but when I was shown such a photo, I had no choice but to accept the reality of the situation. I then surreptitiously peeked into Thomas's computer and phone to find out the truth. What I found was absolutely staggering, a gargantuan number of messages that clearly indicated that he was cheating on me. Perhaps they thought I was going to oblivious to it forever. They were using very understandable language, which is to say they weren't speaking in tongues or in code. It also turned out that all of Thomas's extra hours of work of weekdays, work on weekends and holidays, and business trips were all a big, disgusting lie. No wonder he wouldn't put in more money to pay the expenses. Moreover, it was clear from the text of the messages that the woman was also married. What was even more shocking was that the adulteress was a former colleague of my husband's at his workplace. She is now a retired housewife herself, and, to my surprise, her husband was an employee of Tommy's workplace's business partner. At first, I thought of questioning my husband in anger, but then I realized that the matter might not be confined to the home and cause a great calamity that might get many unsuspecting people involved, most notably Mr. and Mrs. Talino, my in-laws, and my own parents. I desperately tried to regain my composure before consulting my parents in order to make careful preparations for revenge. Per my parents' recommendation, I hired a professional from a detective agency to gather solid evidence of the affair. However, I just could not divorce him just yet. The reason was because my daughter's birthday was coming up. I thought I would pretend not to know about the affair until after her birthday, and then I would talk to him about it. But I had started preparing for the worst, just in case anything happened. The day before her birthday, on Saturday, I baked a cake with Katie. She had heard that her friends at school were baking their cakes for their birthdays, and she wanted to try it out herself.
I want to make you and everyone else a cake for their birthdays, too, one day,
she said, and I smiled as I wove my hand through her beautiful golden hair. She is such a sweet girl, and she cares about others so much. Before long, the cake was finished. It may not have looked like a professional cake, but it was a very special cake with a lot of thought and emotion put into it. Now everything was ready. Tomorrow's birthday was supposed to be a very happy day for her, and to top it all off, she made her own birthday cake. However, an incident that was indescribable in how painful and cruel it was occurred. Something that spoiled her excited feelings for the following day.
I have to go on a business trip starting tomorrow.
My husband, who was working on his day off that Saturday as usual, came home in the evening and immediately told us these words as though they weren't actually bullets, which, from my perspective and Katie's, they absolutely were. I was very surprised, and my daughter was on the verge of crying. Thomas Talino, I've been telling you this for a long time. You are not to go on anything related to work on Katie's birthday. Couldn't you get someone else to do it for you?
It can't be helped, Prudence. Duty calls. Unlike you, I have a job at a company that expects me to do what I can for their benefit. My partner's gonna be upset if I take a day off, because then not only will I be taken off the list of candidates for managerial positions, but they will be too.
And who's this partner you're talking about? I was so angry that I wanted to ask him that question, but I pleaded to myself so desperately to stay calm, for my daughter's sake. She even made an entire cake for tomorrow. Katie was looking forward to eating it with you, honey. I couldn't help it. My voice started to crack, but Thomas only scoffed.
You know you can buy a cake at the store that looks better than that monstrosity, right? Besides, we don't have to eat it tomorrow. Now, more importantly, what about dinner?
By that point, I was trembling with anger. She made this special cake for her special day, Thomas. How could you say such a thing? At least eat it a piece with her now? We can have dinner afterward. Thomas, perhaps offended by these words, let loose a tisk and said,
Shut the frick up. That's enough. I'm going out to eat.
And left the house. Katie, who had witnessed the whole thing, was so shocked that she scampered to her room, whimpering pitifully. I was left standing there in the living room with my mind completely blank. What exactly just happened? No way Thomas just did something so unbelievably cruel to an 8-year-old girl. I never thought she would say such terrible things to me, let alone about his own daughter. I mean, it's one thing to have a relationship with an adulterous bitch, but it's another to actively shatter that unbreakable bond between parent and child. I waited for his return with a passionately blazing bonfire of hate and fury. I thought I had only waited perhaps 20 minutes or so, but I later realized that 2 hours had already passed since then. I checked in on Katie and she had somehow fallen asleep. The poor darling must have cried herself to sleep. And still, my husband hadn't come home. I started to wonder if he had gone to his lover's place by this point. I quickly made up my mind to take action right then and there. In any case, tomorrow's business trip was probably an adulterous date. I also wondered if it was for the other party's convenience that he had announced such a sudden business trip. Then, for the sake of my beloved daughter, I decided to call my parents. I could no longer suppress my anger, not so much for my own sake, but rather for the sake of her. I was going to wait and see if I could show them that Thomas could really be a father who cared about his daughter. I know. Call me a fool, but in this situation, any wife who loved her husband dearly would provide one last chance for him to prove that there was still some love left as a family. But now that that chance was completely abandoned, the final preparations went smoothly, as my parents and I had talked about it beforehand. The next day, on Katie's birthday, we saw Thomas off to work and packed all our stuff and left the apartment, never to return. I felt sorry for Katie, who had just had the worst birthday ever, and my anger at Mr. Talino became the driving force behind my determined actions. 2 days later, Thomas came home from his business trip and called me. His tone sounded like he was very upset and confused, which was exactly what I was hoping he'd feel, given that our apartment was completely deserted by then.
Hey, what the hell is going on?
What do you think is going on? I moved all my belongings out of the apartment, and Katie's too.
Are you so mad at me for going elsewhere on Katie's birthday? Oh, come on, now honey, be reasonable. I had work to do, and I told you that no one could go in my place. We'll celebrate it again next year.
I snickered in disgust at my husband for saying such a thing so nonchalantly when he had broken his daughter's heart. There won't be a next year, buddy.
What the hell? What the frick are you talking about?
I told him to look in the drawer, which he didn't seem to understand at all. A few seconds later, his yell blared through the speakerphone.
What the frick is up with these divorce papers?
I mean it exactly as it is. I want a divorce.
Just because I didn't celebrate Katie's birthday with her? I'm telling you. It couldn't be helped, because it was about work.
I was deeply disgusted by this bastard who still tries to keep the truth from me, even after all this time. Work?
You know I'm always busy with work, damn it.
I don't think you mean work, Thomas. I think you mean affair. I called the company and they said you were on paid leave today, so I really don't know what you mean when you said you were going on a business trip.
What? What are you talking about? Did you actually call the company?
I could immediately tell he was getting very panicked, and I said to him to push him further into a corner. Did you have a good time? On your trip of adultery, I mean?
What are you talking about?
Bingo. I had struck a nerve. I know about it all, Thomas. Looks like you have more important things in than your own daughter. I was too impatient to explain everything, so I sent him the photographic evidence taken by my former colleague, who had contacted me that day and changed the course of history. That was when his attitude suddenly changed and started yelling at me.
You took a fricking photo without any consent. You fricking disgusting little bitch.
I smiled and retorted, but it's even more disgusting to touch a married woman, my dear Mr. Tolino.
What? What the hell? It's your fault for just lounging around at home and not having an ounce of charm.
Lounging around at home? Not an ounce of charm? And who, pray tell, quite literally breaks her back to take care of the house and raise her daughter every day, all of her own, without a fricking gram of support coming from her husband? The next minute, I thought he was going to lash out at me again, but for some reason, he suddenly changed his attitude once again to calm my rebuttal.
Okay, honey. Okay, calm down. Don't be so angry. I just got a little carried away is all. I didn't mean the affair to be for real, and I'm sorry. Forgive me. We're married, aren't we?
But that sudden conversion back to kind and calm wouldn't work on me. You're the one who ruined our marriage, if we ever had anything like that at this point. The love between a man and a woman was long forgotten, but if we had respected each other and had the agreement to at least be there for our daughter, who didn't deserve her parents to have the fight that would decide the fate of their marriage, on her birthday, of all days, we could have at least stayed together as parents and given her the happy life she deserved. I questioned Thomas further. Do you really know what I'm angry about?
I told you. I'm sorry. I was tired from work, and I happened to run into her on my lunch break when I went to a cafe right in between our workplaces, and that's how we got in touch.
That's not what I asked you. You really don't know anything, do you? How can you even call yourself Katie's father? Even if you apologize now, there's no conceivable way that Katie and I can ever forgive you.
You're right. I feel bad for Katie too.
My anger reached its zenith when he mentioned our daughter's name as if it were an afterthought. Okay, that does it. That's enough. I don't want to hear anything else. I'll send a content-certified letter to your workplace. I'll make sure you pay the price for abandoning your loving wife, who did everything she possibly could to give you a nice, peaceful life at home after long hours at work, and your daughter, whose only wish was to spend more time with her darling father. You betrayed our marriage, and you destroyed your daughter's happiness. You deserve hell and nothing more.
Please don't do that. Please. I'll do anything. Let's calm down for a minute and meet somewhere to talk about things.
I was beyond angry at this point, and even beyond disgusted with this bastard, who could only think of his own professional position, even after such a scandal like this. Talking about it won't ever change you. You'll only remain the lying, cheating, cruel person that you are. I'll get my lawyer to call you in due time. I suggest you prepare yourself. I told him that and hung up the phone. All he said was that he felt bad and that he was sorry, but never offered a sincere apology through to the very end. After that, with the help of an attorney, I divorced him. And of course I got as much alimony and child support as I could, and I also demanded alimony from his lover. When the content certified letter arrived at the company, I heard that, because Mr. Tolino was having an affair with an employee of one of the company's major clients, he was forcibly transferred from the head office sales department, which was one of the most prestigious departments in the company, and offered a good salary to an office clerk at a small regional branch out in the countryside. Now he is being paid a dirt cheap salary and does nothing really but clean the office. If my demands for alimony and child support were deducted from his salary, he would be living in poverty. And that's exactly his situation as of now. He's living in a shabby apartment with no bathroom and no air conditioner and eating nothing but bean sprouts and rice every day. When my ex-parents-in-law told me this story, all I could think was good riddance. My ex-in-law went to my parents' house and apologized to me for the way their son treated his daughter. I was frankly touched by how civilized they were. They had gone out of their way to visit my parents' house to apologize to me for the shit Thomas had done. They said they were halfway through severing their ties with him and were so furious with him that they vowed never to provide him any financial support. My daughter and I, on the other hand, returned to my parents' home and are taking it easy as of now, a couple of weeks later. After the whole fiasco came to a close, we had another birthday party for Katie, this time at my parents' house. And this time, it was wonderful. Katie made another cake, this time with the help of her grandma Janice. As a matter of fact, my mother is the equivalent of a professional cook. She went to culinary school when she was younger and was set on starting a restaurant. But her marrying dad changed all that as she became a housewife. However, her skills are immaculate. And it was amazing how perfect everything was, despite the diversity in her recipes. She carefully taught my daughter how to make a cake in the kitchen. Katie was overjoyed and loved the experience, and I was a little relieved that the memory of her worst birthday had somehow been overwritten. Now that I'm getting used to my new life back home with my parents, I'm getting ready to start a new job. I'm looking for a job that will allow me to work from home and spend more time with my daughter. In essence, freelance work.
When you start working, Mommy, I'll do my best to cook you your dinner with Grandma.
I think my daughter has grown up well enough to be able to say such things naturally. Her current dream is apparently to become a pastry chef. That was Mom's specialty too, and she was so happy to bake things with her granddaughter. Dad praised the pastries, saying,
"These are the best cinnamon rolls I've ever had, sweetheart. Grandpa's gonna get fat after eating all of them."
It may be a tough road for us onward, but she has decided on her own to go to a culinary school after graduating from high school. My dream is now to spend happy days supporting her as Katie grows into a strong, independent woman.